Hello, friends, and welcome to the second ever Boxers and Briefs podcast with me, ya boy, Abid. Honestly, didn't think I'd make it this far, but still here. Wanted to thank everyone that watched the last one. Super awesome of you guys. Wanted to thank everyone that gave me comments and feedback. Again, amazing. I wrote it all down. I'm taking it all to heart. I'm going to be changing the format of the show based on that feedback. A lot of you wanted me to make it a bit shorter. I'm gonna hold off on that for now because I'm gonna do something else first, which is to basically segment the show, make it clear when I'm changing topics. Because last time I confused a lot of you guys. My fault. I went from an intro into boxing into a super deep dive, like with terminology that no one fucking understood and people that no one could place. So I'm gonna try and clear all that up this time around. I'm gonna be editing it a bit more. It's gonna be way less of a stream of consciousness. Hopefully it'll be clearer. If it isn't, I guess we're gonna keep playing with the format. So first thing I wanted to do today is run through some of the topics that we're gonna be going through. First of all, I wanted to talk about some of the fights coming up, both MMA and boxing. You have some big announcements, some that I missed last week. So I want to get through those, give you my picks, tell you what I think is going to happen. Then we're going to do a bit of a boxing deep dive on the three universes currently in boxing. After that, I'm going to tell you about my weird ass job, where I work in the weird and wacky world of waste management. And they're weird stories, you'll enjoy them. Like, I definitely know that the people I've told these stories to have gotten a kick from them, and they've all happened basically within the last week. So this could be a recurring segment. Finally, I'm gonna go on a rant because that's what a podcast is. It's some dude going on a rant, and then when he's done, you turn it off and move on with your life. Before that, I wanted to thank you guys again for watching. Thank you guys again for the comments. I didn't really explain last time why I wanted to do the podcast. It's called Boxers and Briefs, obviously, but it's twofold, really. It's because I honestly believe that the best way to make someone appreciate something is to have someone that's passionate about it explain it. And I am super passionate about the sport of boxing, and I never get to talk about it with anyone. So I just wanted to basically have an outlet to just say my thoughts. And hopefully, like, if you guys are listening, you can appreciate some of the intricacies that go into the sport, and you can become fans too. Like, I'm telling you, it's gonna be a good few years for boxing. There's more boxing than ever. A lot of it's for free. It's amazing. Okay. And here's the thing. I know most of you will still not like boxing by the end of like 100 episodes of this podcast, but still, I do want this thing that I'm doing to be accessible. That's why I like the idea of segments. Actually, it's because, like, basically, if you don't like the boxing deep dive, you can skip through it, get to the more interesting parts for you. Like, I just want this to be like a forum, right? I want this to be something where, like, you can use it to learn a bit of boxing. You can use it to hear weird stories about dead whales. That'll make sense later. You could use it to just hear me rant for a bit. Who knows? And if you don't agree with me, or if you do agree with me, then let me know. It'll be awesome. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop the freestyle segment because I clearly have not prepared this, but you get the idea. Much love, guys. Hello, friends, and welcome to Upcoming Fights with Abid. First one I really wanted to talk about was Holloway versus Poirier. So, for those of you that probably don't know MMA as much as I do, right? You know about the UFC, you know Conor McGregor, and you probably know Khabib, right? So Khabib defended his title against Conor, and then the Nevada State Athletic Commission gave Khabib and his teammates pretty hefty fines and suspensions, but they gave his teammates a year out while they gave him 9 months with the option of making it 6 months. Right? So Khabib at this point is just like, no, I'm going to stay out for a whole year because I want to stand with my teammates. Since he's going to be out for a whole year, and he's too big of a name for the UFC to strip, of the title, they've created an interim title fight, right? So that's where Max Holloway comes in. Holloway is the champion in the weight division right below. And he is a fucking beast. He's been on a tear, and he wanted to move up and fight Khabib like ages ago. It didn't work out. His weight cut didn't go that well, but now he's finally fighting for the interim title. He was supposed to be fighting Tony Ferguson, but apparently Ferguson turned it down because Ferguson had already won an interim title that the UFC canceled, so he didn't want to go through that again. Which I understand. Like, it was bullshit that they canceled the interim title when he held it. It made no sense. Like, the guy's on like an 11-fight winning streak. He's crazy talented. He's done everything that they've asked of him. They shouldn't have stripped him. But he turned down the fight, which I think rightfully so. It's just a bit of a bummer because I would have liked that fight a bit more. But in comes the stud, Dustin Poirier. This is going to be such a good fight. They're both on winning streaks. There's a lot of storylines going into this because this is for the interim title in Khabib's division. They actually both fought before, so this is technically Holloway versus Poirier 2. In the first fight, Poirier beat Holloway, but it was Holloway's debut in the UFC, so he had something like 4 professional fights at that point. He was like maybe 3-1 or possibly 4-0. And he got the shit kicked out of him by Poirier. But it was still like a pretty decent fight because Holloway is a stud. So yeah, no, I'm super looking forward to this fight. It's a bit of a pick'em fight for me, just because Dustin Poirier's been at the weight for longer, but Holloway's he's big for a featherweight, so he can move up pretty easily. I have to go with Holloway. I have to. Like, he's just better on all accounts. Like, his resume is much better in my eyes. Like, if you beat Jose Aldo twice, you're automatically better than a guy that whose biggest win arguably is Justin Gaethje. Like, no offense to Justin Gaethje, great fighter, but like, he's a guy that goes in there looking to knock someone out or get knocked out. Like, he's not one of the greatest of all time, right? And that's what Jose Aldo is. And like, in Holloway's last fight, he shut down Brian Ortega, and Brian Ortega is a beast, and he's also a big featherweight. So, have to lean with Holloway on this one, just because I think he has the better resume. I think he has more momentum. I think he's a better fighter. So, that was a fight that was announced last week. This is happening in UFC 236, but UFC 235 is this Saturday. UFC 235 is going to be an amazing card because it's so stacked. You have 2 title fights, okay? So you have John Jones, Anthony Smith. I don't want to talk about this one too much. Jones with his like the Turinabol situation, how he's always going to test positive, but they're still going to let him fight. I don't like it. And also, no disrespect to Anthony Smith, he's not a world beater. He beat 3 former champions, sure, but they were all like 50. You know, they were all shot. I don't care. Beating Volkan is not that impressive because I think Volkan is super overrated. So I don't want to talk too much about that one just because I think John Jones beats him handily. In the co-main event, you have Woodley versus Usman. A lot of drama coming into this one because there's another dude called Colby Covington that's kicking up a fuss because, like Tony Ferguson in the fight before this, he got screwed out of an interim title, which is, again, I don't like the idea of interim titles. I don't like how the UFC keeps screwing guys out of them after they win them. Like, if you make an interim title, stick with it. But yeah, he gets screwed out of an interim title, and instead of him getting the shot at Woodley, Usman gets the shot at Woodley. But to be completely honest, the resumes are the same. They're interchangeable for me. I hate Covington. I don't really care. I think Woodley beats Usman. I think it's a close competitive fight because Usman's he's pretty fresh. He's pretty big. He's pretty strong. He does a lot of things amazing. I think Woodley made a great point when he was just like, "You're just the younger version of me, and I'm still not slipping." So, between 2 guys that are the same and one has a bit more experience, I gotta go with Woodley. And here's the thing, you're gonna see this a lot. I ride a lot with the champ, because I believe that they're a champ for a reason. Like, when I see a contender that I know can beat a champion, I will more than happily say it. But when I see something where it's a bit more of a close fight, I'll tend to lean with the champ. Next one is one that I'm super excited about. Still on the UFC 235 card. Ben Askren finally makes it to the UFC and he fights Robbie Lawler. Great fight. Former welterweight champ, welcoming Ben Askren to the UFC. It's going to be amazing. Ruthless is a crazy fighter. Ruthless Robbie Lawler, I mean. Crazy guy. Like, check out any fight. Just Google Robbie Lawler fight. Like, you'll find so many fucking fight of the years. So many just like all-time great fights. The guy goes in there to just kill. It's amazing. Now on to a bit of boxing, right? Just some quick news. James DeGale has retired. His career wasn't that long, but I understand why he's important to British fans. He was the first British fighter to win gold at the Olympics and then translate that into a world title. He was a pretty good fighter. He was just in too many wars, so he ended up cutting his career short just because he couldn't maintain that pace. So much respect to DeGale. You had a great career. Yay you getting out too early as opposed to too late. Some of the fights coming up, you have AJ Anthony Joshua versus Big Baby Miller. I like this fight. I think it introduces Anthony Joshua to the US audience. I think Jarrell Miller is going to hype up the fight just because he has a big mouth. I think Joshua knocks him out in 7 rounds, but I think it'll be a fun fight until then. There is one worry that AJ is just going to play a bit too safe because he's really looking towards that money fight with Fury or Wilder. But I think it'll still be a fun fight. Like, he knows he needs to knock him out. If this is your first fight on US soil, you're introducing yourself to the masses, you need to knock him out. No question about it. So I think he'll do that. Coming soon, though, is a huge middleweight unification between Canelo Alvarez, and here's the thing, if you're watching this and you don't know Canelo Alvarez, I need to tell you my favorite fact about Canelo Alvarez. Canelo means little cinnamon because he's a redhead. Isn't that adorable? Anyway, Canelo Alvarez versus Danny Jacobs, the numbers 2 and 3 best middleweights in the world, in my opinion, right? But them, along with Gennady Golovkin, are the top 3 by far. It's impossible to argue otherwise. Gennady Golovkin lost to Canelo in a very controversial decision that could have been a draw, but me personally, I saw it as a win for Gennady. So Canelo takes all those titles and the ring middleweight title, and he goes into this fight with Jacobs. And Jacob has his own trinket, right? He has his IBF belt. So this fight's gonna be for the unified, basically undisputed middleweight champion of the world. And this is happening on DAZN. It's gonna be a great fight, I think. I think Canelo has to edge it. Like, he's had some problems with stick and movers, right? His one loss was to Mayweather. He constantly gets flustered with boxers, but I really think he's done well to improve. I think those fights with Gennady have made him an impeccable fighter. I have to pick Canelo just because I think he's a bit stronger at the weight. I think his upper body movement will give Jacobs some trouble. Jacobs' movement in general will give Canelo trouble, so I think it's going to be a tight, maybe a bit controversial decision for Canelo, to be honest. I don't see a knockout either way. I think if Jacobs can withstand Gennady, he can withstand Canelo. Because all these guys have fought, and that's how we know they're the 1s through 3 of this division. It's amazing. Like, it's really the one division where the top guys have all fought each other, or will fight each other. Great. Yay. Do more of that. Last thing I want to touch on this week when it comes to upcoming fights and stuff like that. I have to not break the news, but I have to tell you guys that Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury is officially not happening next. WBC broke the news because they were going to force a purse bid when Top Rank informed them that they were no longer looking for that fight for Tyson Fury. Now both guys are going to take interim fights. I have no idea who they're going to fight. It doesn't look like anyone interesting, to be honest, because anyone within the top 10 already has a fight. You have Dominic Breazeale versus Dillian White. They're probably going to get to an agreement. They're fighting to be the mandatory for Wilder's title. You have Joshua Miller. You have rumors say, and this is not for sure, right, but Alexander Usyk finally making his heavyweight debut against Povetkin, so that takes both of them out. Yeah, no, you don't have that many options for these guys, so they're probably gonna fight tomato cans, and they're probably gonna kill all the momentum, which is devastating. Get your shit together, guys. Jesus Christ. Hello, friends, and welcome to Abid's Boxing Deep Dive with me, Abid. So, this week it's a bit of an intro. Not really that deep of a dive. Hopefully it doesn't confuse you that much. I even made graphics to help you along. This week we're going to talk about the different alliances in boxing, so promoters, television networks, and then what that means for the fighters and what that means for the fights. So just as a brief history, right? Boxing used to be like any other sport. They'd report it in the newspapers, then they'd report it over the radio, and then there was a live feed on your television. And then Muhammad Ali came along, basically, and he was so super famous that everyone was just like, I would pay money to watch him. And they said that in front of people that were like, shit, we should charge money for people to watch him. So right about that time, right, in the 70s, specifically 1973, HBO became an entity, and it really pioneered what was known as closed circuit television. So what that was is basically they'd film the fight and then feed that directly to theaters around the US, and you'd buy a ticket basically to go watch the fight. If you couldn't go watch it live, you could watch it in the theater. And that was basically the precursor to pay-per-view. So HBO really pioneered that. This was good and bad for the sport because the good it did is that it really cultivated just great champions. It built up great fights. It built up a lot. Right, it made the sport mythological in a lot of sense, in some sense, right? But the main issue, right, or the main problem with what they did is they took the sport away from the mainstream and made it niche. Last year, HBO exited the sport of boxing. It no longer wanted anything to do with the sport due to a bunch of things, but the way I understood it is that in order to fend off a takeover, their parent company limited HBO's budget so they could use that money to fight off Fox, I believe, that was trying to buy them. And what that did is it seriously reduced the war chest that HBO had, and they used most of that money for Game of Thrones. Like, legitimately, not trying to fuck about. That's what they did, because Game of Thrones was a much more reliable source of money. It was a mainstream crossover hit that they wanted to maintain. So boxing didn't get as much money. A lot more of the fights went to pay-per-view because it's a model where you pass the costs along, so HBO wouldn't have to pay for it directly. And like they started putting fights that had no business being on pay-per-view, so the consumer stopped buying them. At some point, it just stopped being feasible, and they exited the sport. But when they did exit the sport, that left a huge vacuum because HBO was really synonymous with boxing up until last year. And what you have now is three distinct universes that have tried to basically fill that void, and they're all vying for supremacy. So the first one you have is Al Heyman's PBC aligned with Showtime. So Al Heyman's PBC is aligned with Showtime, and to an extent Fox, like they have free shows on Fox. And what they have is the largest stable of fighters. They have the largest high quality stable of fighters, I have to say. They control one of the biggest money divisions. They really control welterweight. They have a lot of the biggest names. They have Errol Spence, Mikey Garcia, Keith Thurman, like all just really great welterweights. Like not great in terms of history, but great for now, right? They also control junior middleweight. They have Jarrett Hurd. They have the Jamel Charlo. They also have some decent players at middleweight. You have Jamal Charlo at middleweight. And then they also own, or not own, Shouldn't say that. They also work with Deontay Wilder, who is one of the 3 claimants to the heavyweight throne. So they have a very big roster. They have a lot of fighters, and a lot of their fighters can just fight themselves, right? They don't really have to reach across the aisle, which is an issue when you have someone like Deontay Wilder, just like, fight Fury again, please, or fight Joshua, please. Just come on. Like, those are the fights to make, clearly, but he can make pretty great money just staying in the PBC, playing it safe with some tomato cans, you know. The next major set of alliances is the newest kid on the block, and that's a company called DAZN. I hate the name. They have a cool logo, but I really hate the name. It's a streaming service, so they're really trying to revolutionize the way people watch sports. Basically, they market themselves as the Netflix of sports. They have a few other properties, but boxing's really their main thing. They also have some MMA. They own the rights to Bellator these days, or they're aligned with Bellator these days. But in terms of boxing, they're aligned with Golden Boy Promotions, which is owned by Oscar De La Hoya. And their cash cow, or really their only big, huge fighter of note, is Canelo. So Canelo, one of the biggest pay-per-view draws, has actually moved away from pay-per-view and gone to DAZN. And he's a great feather to have in their cap. Like, he's definitely a big reason why subscribers are flocking to DAZN. The other promoter that they have aligned with them is Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn is the biggest promoter in the UK, and he's trying to do a US invasion, basically. And his stable of fighters in the US is pretty respectable. He has Danny Jacobs, who's facing Canelo, but clearly fighting each other on DAZN. They don't have to fight from anyone from like some of the other stables, and some of those fights would be pretty interesting in my view. And then you have, as part of the package with Eddie Hearn, Anthony Joshua. Again, another claimant to the heavyweight throne. And Anthony Joshua probably has the best claim right now to being the man, just for the fact that he has 3 out of the 4 titles. He's fought the toughest competition. He beat Klitschko he knocked him out. He beat him pretty devastatingly. He beat Alexander Povetkin, whose only loss was to Klitschko before this. He's beat other champions. He beat Charles Martin. He beat... I can't believe I'm spacing on the guy from New Zealand, but I'm sure his picture will be there right now. Anyway. So you have another claimant to the heavyweight throne, and you also have something known as this World Boxing Super Series, which is... It's a fun tournament that only got started about 2 years ago. And the point of the tournament is to crown an undisputed champ. Right, it's an awesome tournament. Like, the tournaments like this have been tried in boxing, but like, there's always injuries, there's always political alliances. But what the World Boxing Super Series has done is it's taken the alliances out of the equation by signing up directly with the fighters themselves, not with the networks. So that's a bit less of an issue, and it's fun. It's good. Like, I genuinely think that, like, with Canelo, Anthony Joshua, and the World Boxing Super Series, like, probably the best content is going to be on DAZN. Like, I know I said Showtime and Fox have the biggest stable of fighters, but like, the fights aren't that interesting sometimes. Like, they do put on a lot of good shows, but sometimes, like, their big names don't really fight other big names, which is, like, at least on DAZN you have Canelo versus Danny Jacobs, and then you have AJ versus Miller. Like, that's not a crazy matchup, but they're both rated pretty highly among everyone when it comes to heavyweights, and Jarrell will make this a fun fight, so who knows. Last but not least, you have the Last Universe, which has, I'd say, the biggest reach, right? ESPN has signed up with Top Rank, right? So you have the biggest name in sports and the biggest promoter in the game. And you have them both in this gigantic deal. It's something like a 7-year deal where Top Rank is to provide them with like 40 shows a year. It's some ridiculous number. So it's a lot of boxing on free at ESPN, or basic. Oh, a balloon just floated by. Anyway, ESPN has a lot of interesting fighters as well. They probably have the most talented fighters, to be honest. Like all of these different platforms have something going for them. You have Tyson Fury, who's probably the best boxer amongst the heavyweight claimants to the throne. He triple feints, he triple jabs, he boxes on a level that to a lot of people it seems boring. It kind of is, because he's not doing much, but he's really getting into someone's head when he's doing all these things. And he's making them not want to throw any punches. Like he plays the mental game probably better than anyone in the sport. You have Terrence Bud Crawford. My personal pick for pound number one, to be honest. He's a switch hitter. He can be orthodox. He can be southpaw. He throws punches in bunches. He has a killer instinct. He takes you out if he thinks you're hurt. I love him. Great fighter. And then you have Vasyl Lomachenko, who's most people's pick for number one pound for pound. And I won't argue with them on that. I just think Bud has a bit more of a resume. But Vasyl Lomachenko won a world title in his third fight. He's 12-1 now. So his one loss was a close loss against a guy who cheated. And then every other loss has been him looking fucking phenomenal. Like, this guy is... They call him high tech. They call him Matrix. They call him No Maschenko because he makes you want to quit. He's just like, he moves like a ballerina because he did ballet for 4 years. It's amazing. He's great to watch. But here's the thing, right? Now that I've given you a bit of a taste for what the universes are, here's why I don't like where we're headed, right? You have Vasyl Lomachenko, who could be fighting Mikey Garcia, who's another highly rated person at that weight. But Mikey Garcia is in the PBC and he's fighting someone else. You have Terrence Crawford, who's one of the best welterweights, arguably in probably the last 10 years. But he's on ESPN and all the other welterweights are on the PBC. You have Canelo, Jacobs, and probably Gennady Golovkin, like the top three middleweights on DAZN. But then you have Jermall Charlo, who's an excellent middleweight, who would make for a lot of interesting fights on the PBC. And like the cross-pollination doesn't happen that much because like the promoter's main goal now is to secure his product for his partner, which is the TV station, which is like, I don't care if your guy stays undefeated on ESPN. If he stays undefeated on ESPN, but there's a guy that I think can beat him on PBC, I want to see them fight. I don't care. So this is what it means to be a boxing fan. Just like seeing all these awesome fights that could happen and just being frustrated. And there's no division that's more guilty of this right now than the heavyweights. You have Tyson Fury signed up recently with ESPN. Like, look, if I'm Tyson Fury, I'm taking that deal any day of the week. It's like 80 million pounds for 5 fights. Like, the guy lives in a caravan. Like, yeah, I'd take that money easy, you know? It's generational wealth. But now he's not going to fight Deontay Wilder next. Now he probably can't fight Joshua next. Like, it's just a bit of a muddle, right? And like, then you have guys like Joshua and Wilder saying that no, we're not exclusive to our television stations. You're exclusive to your promoters. Your promoters are exclusive to the station. Like, it's going to be really hard for you to convince me that you're actually going to do it. I think it will happen, not in 2019 though. I think they will build their profiles up to a point where it's just, there's too much money on the table for them not to fight. But that's the thing about heavyweight boxing. There's usually way more money in that than other divisions. So we might solve that issue, but we probably won't solve the other ones. So that's this boxing deep dive for this week. Just a quick intro into the futility of being a fan. Hello friends, and welcome to the weird and wacky world of waste management with your boy, me. So if you know me, you know that I am obsessed with efficiency. Like, I'm constantly getting into trouble because I like to cut corners, because the corners are in my way, and I don't want to go around the corner, I want to go through it because it's efficient. Not the point. Anyway, right? And that concept of efficiency drew me to waste management, because waste management is basically looking at all the opportunities lost in terms of that material. And it's really just looking at something and just being like, I could have reused this a billion different ways. I could have taken this phone, removed the glass, removed the plastic, removed the precious metals, and could have used it in 20 different things, right? But that's not what we're going to talk about today. What we're going to talk about is the really fucking weird shit. So in the last week, right, these three things have happened. First, not one, but 2 grenades blew up 2 vehicles in a region that shall remain nameless in this country that I'm in, that I won't tell you, right? But basically, apparently two people decided to throw away hand grenades. And as a result of that, they destroyed 2 different vehicles, right? Because if you know what a refuse collection vehicle is, it's that thing that basically takes the waste bin and flips it over, right? But what it does is it has a little arm in there that scoops and then compresses. So when you keep scooping and compressing, and then to the point where the grenade gets squished, you break the vehicle. So that's this story isn't that crazy. It's just the fact that it happened twice from 2 different people to 2 different cars using 2 different grenades. The second story, this one happened much more directly with me, right? But apparently, one of the areas, the contractor that I'm supervising services is a falconry club, right? And if you know I'm in the Gulf, right? They love their falcons. Apparently this falconers club is so vast, and the people that love falcons there love them to such a degree that there are so many falcons that the sheer amount of shit that they expel on a daily basis is too much for the truck to lift. And it's too much for a 1.1 cubic meter container. We had to get them a 7 cubic meter skip, which is basically only ever used for huge developments or construction sites. Like, you need a gigantic amount of waste. And it's just apparently the love for birds is so gigantic, and like the amount of cloacas is so mind-boggling that the amount of bird shit is breaking machines. We've had to allocate for them gigantic industrial shovel to scoop up all the bird shit. So there's a giant pooper scooper. It has one job. It goes to the Falconers Club once a day to scoop up bird shit and then carry it away. Final story. This one is my personal favorite. So part of what I do is I supervise a contractor that's coming in to a new area, and I ensure that they're doing the services, right? They have specific services that they need to be doing at all times. And one of them is the removal of dead animals. My company wrote that part, right? The removal of dead animals part. And like, it makes sense. Like, if there's a dead cat on the road, you don't want it to stay there, because like it gets turned into mush. It's ew. What we didn't see coming was that this specific dead animal was really just a bit of a surprise for everyone. And I had to kind of argue with the contractor that technically, in the wording of the contract, you have to clean it up. A whale, a 25-meter whale, so a gigantic, absolute monster of a whale, somehow beached itself on a private beach, and it was just there for a few days. And they apparently this property is so vast that they didn't see it, right? But when they did see it, they started calling around, and they're like, who the hell takes care of dead whales? Apparently, the contractor I'm supervising does. So he sent over a couple of shovels and a crane, and everything tipped over because it's a 25-meter whale and it's fucking huge. So everything tipped over, and there's just a bunch of equipment now lying on its side. Apparently it took them about a day to figure out how to cut up the whale, put it into the trucks, and then take it away. It's been incinerated now, so rest in peace, whale. That's it for this week's edition of the weird and wacky world of waste management. Thanks for joining. Hello friends, and welcome to the final segment for today, Abid Rants. What I really wanted to rant about today is separating the art from the artist, right? And this is something that really has been at the forefront of what I've been seeing recently, just with the whole mute R. Kelly thing and all the stuff that's been happening. R. Kelly is a terrible person. Harvey Weinstein, horrible person. Kevin Spacey, terrible person. They gave us great art though, and just trying to mute someone because they did something bad is a terrible precedent to set. Because you have so many artists throughout the years that were just horrible people, but their art, it literally changed popular culture. You have someone like John Lennon. John Lennon used to terrorize Yoko Ono and his son. His son grew up to hate John Lennon. Like, I know he's all hippy-dippy and flowers and blah blah blah, but he was a horrible guy. And still, no one is going to mute him because his music changed people, right? It impacted people because it was art. Same thing with R. Kelly. He's a horrific person, but honestly, I Believe I Can Fly is a great song. It was a big part of my childhood. I fucking love that song. If you look at someone like Harvey Weinstein helped facilitate hundreds of movies. He's a terrible guy, but he still gave us art. Like, just because someone did something bad does not mean that their art or their contribution to society is invalidated. Just because someone did something horrible doesn't mean that what they gave us should no longer be used, right? Another example is Tupac. Tupac is everyone's pick for the greatest rapper of all time. And we can get into this in another podcast because I don't think he's that. But Tupac is a convicted rapist. Like, he's all the things that they're saying R. Kelly is, but no one's gonna mute Tupac. No one's gonna remove his music. And I'm not saying people are playing favorites. I don't really care. My whole point is that setting a precedent with muting R. Kelly, or muting anyone for that matter, is dangerous because you have to have, like, even unsavory people can contribute something good. And art is always good, no matter if you agree with it or not. It's always something good because it pushes the boundary, and that's the point, right? So if someone asks you, do you separate the art from the artist? Say yes. I really wanted to do that. Anyway, thank you so much, guys. Would love to hear what you think of the new format. Would love to hear what you think I should change or not change, any of that. Yeah, thanks again. Let me know what you think. Much love, guys.